Well, I guess it was coming, right? It wasn't a question of if, but a question of how soon. And it just happened on October the 7th. That is the firing of Oklahoma defensive coordinator Mike Stoops. Not a surprise at all. And I'm not even surprised about the timing of it. I mean, I'm sure many Sooner fans thought that Stoops would lose his job at the end of the year rather than during the year. Well, Sooners decided to do it during the bye week, which I'll get into more of that later on. But the Mike Stoops era, which had two stints from 99 to 03, and then from 2012 to present day, 11 and a half years, and it ends very, very badly. And by the way, apologizes in advance. I'm now in the final stages of a cold that's just been kicking my butt for almost a week now, but it looks like I'm getting over it. Unfortunately, a good part of my voice has flown south, so apologies for that. But getting back to Mike Stoops, there are going to be some out there who will say, well, the Texas game is what lost him his job. We know that it goes deeper than the Texas game. And as a matter of fact, I am going to say that the Texas game is not what lost him his job. The Texas game is what put Mike Stoops out of his misery, in my opinion. There was just signs these recent seasons that the Oklahoma defense was not right. And, of course, the college football playoff for the Sooners had a golden opportunity to face Bama for the national championship. And, of course, we know what happened in the second half and in overtime against the Bulldogs. The defense was a major issue. And entering this year, we kept hearing that the Sooner defense was better. Even Kenneth Murray publicly did not feel like Oklahoma's defense was getting respect. And he was right for the first two games. But rather than it being a trend of Oklahoma's defense progressing after their impressive performances against Florida Atlantic and UCLA, it was just a mirage. Basically tricking people into thinking that OU's defense was back to being a top-notch D, which we saw in the early 2000s. Not the case at all. The hints of trouble for this year, the Iowa State game where the Sooners had blown coverages and, of course, horrible tackling. The next game against Army, couldn't get off the field to save their life. Was on the field for 3/4 of the game, about 45 of the 60 minutes of regulation. And then last week against Baylor, despite the impressive win, the defense, again, was a letdown, giving up over 400 yards in passing and giving up a ton of first downs. This past Saturday was another eyesore. Over 500 yards given up to the Longhorns. You also gave up touchdowns on, 6 of Texas's first 8 possessions. Just embarrassing. It was very difficult to watch. And if that wasn't enough to make you realize that that things weren't right for the Sooners, something that Dean Blevins, by the way, reported on the Sunday night News 9 broadcast. Blevins, if you are not from the Oklahoma area, he is the sports director for the CBS affiliate for Oklahoma City, KWTV. He reported that there were problems in the locker room, both at halftime and postgame of the OU-Texas game on Saturday. In fact, during halftime, one OU player, which Dean did not mention, came very close to quitting. And then after the game, Mike Stoops offering to resign, but Lincoln Riley refusing to accept the resignation. But yet the next day, Mike Stoops gets fired. So you have to wonder if Lincoln just didn't want to address the situation that Saturday and wanted to wait till Sunday to address it, or you have to wonder if there's some sort of a financial tie into all this as far as Mike Stoops and as far as if that's why he wasn't allowed to resign on Saturday. So that, I'm sure, will play out later. But the Mike Stoops era comes to an end. No surprise at all, even though it's midseason. And all you have to do is just look at the Sooners, how they've been playing defensively. Bad schemes, players not always lined up in the right spot, getting driven 3, 4, 5 yards back like we've seen against Army, like we saw against Texas this past Saturday. The tackling's been horrendous. Missed tackles, missed sacks, not getting any pressure from your defensive line. You have all those working against Mike Stoops. And from what Dean had reported, what happened this past Saturday with the negative emotion during halftime and at the end of the game, the biggest eyesore to me is the fact that Mike Stoops just lost control of his defense, had no control of his defense at all. And that's your number one ingredient for losing your job, is when you don't have control of your unit. Now, do I think that the firing of Mike Stoops makes Oklahoma into a much better defense? Not this season, okay? Not this season. Whoever Oklahoma decides to make their permanent defensive coordinator, and whenever they make that decision, 2 words: talent upgrade. It's that simple. Talent upgrade. Talent does make your coaching staff look better than what they are. It's that simple, okay? And I know Mike Stoops, these were his players, okay? So if there is blame as far as the lack of talent for this Oklahoma defense, that falls on Mike Stoops' shoulders, okay? So, he needs to accept responsibility for that. You've got to get an upgrade in talent. And I'm going to bring up some examples, okay? Brent Venables. Remember him? Oklahoma defensive coordinator from the 2000s. And we heard so many complaints, people wanting him fired. Okay, there was fire Brent Venables chants that you heard so much I wanted to throw up. Of course, went to Clemson. Suddenly he's one of the best defensive coordinators in college football. One of the highest paid assistant coaches. I think he makes more than $2 million annually. Did Brent Venables, when he came to Clemson, suddenly change his coaching philosophy, his coaching schemes, and suddenly get less emotional when coaching? From the outside looking in, I seriously doubt it. I seriously doubt he changed anything he did at all. So why is Venables this great defensive coordinator? Clemson can recruit with the big boys of college football, with the Alabamas, with the Ohio States, with the Michigans, with the Georgias. They get NFL-type talent. That's one reason. You look at Clemson's defensive line, all 4 of those guys are going to the NFL. A couple of them will probably be All-Americans. All 4 should be All-ACC in some capacity. And they've got other players on that side of the ball that are going to go to the NFL. The ACC is another big reason, too. ACC offenses are not on the same level as Big 12 offenses. So if you get a defensive coordinator on a permanent basis soon to replace Mike Stoops, they better be able to bring in talent that wants to play in the Big 12. The Big 12 does not produce a lot of NFL talent, especially on the defensive side. If I'm a 5-star defensive back or linebacker or defensive lineman, I'm thinking about long term. I'm thinking about the NFL and which college, which league is going to propel me to the maximum as far as my draft status. And the Big 12 does not offer that. And because you've got these sophisticated offenses in the league like Oklahoma, Oklahoma State is still good offensively. We know how good Texas Tech is. And it hasn't shown this year, but T.C.U. has had terrific offenses since they went to the spread formation. West Virginia's offense is electric. So if you are a defense, it is a nightmare to try to keep up with the opposing offenses in this league. And people say, well, bring Brent Venables back. If you're Brent Venables, why would you want to come back to Oklahoma? You got a great gig at Clemson. You're going to continue to get pay raises. And you're going to be in a league that offensively won't challenge you to the degree that the Big 12 does. I wouldn't leave the ACC. My butt's staying right there, where I'm going to contend for national titles. And I'm going to continue to have NFL-type talent on my side of the ball. The Oklahoma defensive line can't get pressure on the quarterback at all. You have to dial up blitzes, which don't always work for Oklahoma, in order to try to get to the quarterback. And one other thing, too. He is the greatest college football coach of all time, no question, Nick Saban. But after he won a national championship with LSU in the early 2000s, he decided to give the NFL a try, and he learned how important terrific talent is. Saban didn't change as an NFL coach when he came to the Miami Dolphins. In fact, he even made one player cry. I remember that during a practice. Nick Saban did not have one of the most talented teams in the NFL. The Miami Dolphins have not had a very talented team compared to other teams in the NFL for at least the last 20 years. Saban lost more games than he won with the Miami Dolphins, and he said, screw the NFL, I'm going back to college. He went to Alabama, the rest is history. But you look at recruiting, you look at the top schools in the country, Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson, for example, you got to have the talent to do it as well. You think Nick Saban can coach the Kansas Jayhawks to the Big 12 championship? No way. They'd be a better team, but they're not elevating themselves to Big 12 championship stature. You got to have the players to do it as well. And I admit that scheme is a part of it too, but players as well. And that's why you have to have a defensive coordinator that can get the talent to come to the Big 12. And in the case of the Sooners defense, physical, bigger defensive backs would be a nice start. Okay? That'd be a nice start. So the Mike Stoops era ends. Again, no surprise from this Sooner fan. Certainly wish the best for the guy, but a change had to be made. OU decided to make it, and they decided to make it in a rare form during the middle of the season. Sooners have 6 games to go, and the recruiting part of this, too, I think is another reason why they made the change now. I mean, the off weekend will most likely mean a recruiting weekend for the Sooners, and you don't want, the stature of Mike Stoops to overwhelm what you've got going right now, because the Sooners don't want to lose any verbal commitments that they have right now, and they don't want to miss out on other players that Texas probably just nabbed up this past weekend as a result of the Longhorns' win. So the recruiting element of it, and of course, you've got 2 weeks to get ready for T.C.U. So I think you made the change partially, too, as a result of the timing of all this and getting used to how Oklahoma will change defensively between now and October the 20th for the TCU game. So that's it. I'm going to go grab some throat lozenges. We'll see how the Sooners play out the second half of the season. Boomer Sooner.